Hello everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of Animate Ball! We've got a new slew of animated works from across the world to explore, and the first entry on our list is No. It's not your turn yet. The first entry on our list is Kimi no Na wa, otherwise known as Your Name. First released in Japan in 2016, the film generated incredible hype during its first few months in theaters, shattering Japanese box office records left and right. It generated rave reviews from critics and audiences, some even hailing the film's director as the next Hayao Miyazaki. Naturally, all the buzz made me curious, so let's get into it. Your Name is about Mitsuha and Taki, a girl from a traditional Japanese village and a boy from Tokyo, who somehow start waking up in each other's bodies. The film is strongest in the visual department, as evidenced by its thoroughly fluid and consistent animation. Something that stood out to me about the animation is the expressions of the characters. They're able to convey strong emotions without making their faces too cartoonish, which keeps them consistent with the film's more realistic art style. I also found it cute when Taki and Mitsuha's mannerisms would follow them into each other's bodies, like this shot of Mitsuha twirling her hair out of habit. The film's special effects are seamlessly composited and make for some breathtaking shots, such as this sequence that opens the film. Speaking of integration, we even have some 3D assets in this film. Remember how the triplets of Belleville blended in 3D models by giving them the same drawn look as the rest of the artwork? This film excellently integrates 3D as well. Like in Belleville, the models match the art style and the lighting of the scenes, so they don't stick out. The settings are beautifully crafted, from the modern skyline of Tokyo to the Valley of Itamori. The setting that interested me most is this mountaintop, which seems to be based on a real location in northern Japan. That location is Mount Osore, a Buddhist temple built into the caldera of a volcano. In the film, the mountaintop houses a small shrine and is too a caldera. Also like the real location, there's a small stream running through the caldera. I took this as a subtle nod to the river Styx, the border leading to the underworld in Greek mythology. As it turns out, a similar concept exists in Japanese mythology, known as the Sanzu River, or River of Three Crossings. These ties to the underworld have a little significance to the film's story, which we'll get to later. Now let's discuss the characters, starting with our leads. Taki is just plain boring. Initially, he has no personality aside from being a short-fused workaholic. He becomes nicer after a certain point, but this change in character is so abrupt that it doesn't feel natural. Not only that, it turns him into the kind of generic nice guy protagonist that you'll see in a million other anime. We don't even get a real look at what Taki is like until nearly a half hour in. Overall, he's an unremarkable high schooler from Tokyo. That's about it. Then we have Mitsuha. She's your everyday high school girl who wants to move to the city. What makes her a little more interesting than Taki is that she lives in a Shinto shrine and participates in its rituals. If her traditional upbringing had a clear influence on her character, like how she views the world or treats other people, it would help round her character out and make her a little more than an ordinary high schooler. Instead, she just hates her life in Itamori and wants to move somewhere more exciting. Another part of Mitsuha that could have been executed better was her relationship with her father, who's the mayor of their town. The reason for this is so she can get him to evacuate the town during the film's climax. While that's a good idea, the problem with this subplot is that it's underdeveloped. The film suggests that Mitsuha has a strained relationship with him, and may have been afraid of him. But nothing comes of this. The only other time Mitsuha interacts with her father is during the climax, at which point she directly confronts him without issue. There's no progression there. Among the side characters we see the most are Mitsuha's sister and grandmother, who are your standard wise old lady and little sister characters, Taki's workmate Odakara, and his friend Tsukasa. Odakara had a potentially interesting role in the film as Taki's workplace crush. You'd think a significant conflict would come out of one character messing with the relationships of another, but that doesn't happen. Taki and Odakara just end up having an awkward date that has little impact on their relationship. Tsukasa, meanwhile, is just kind of along for the ride. Next up we have Tessie and Sayaka, Mitsuha's two friends, and the characters I felt the most interested in. Tessie is the son of a contractor? Who's a little eccentric and interested in the occult, while Sayaka is a sympathetic girl who's into broadcasting. Obviously, these two aren't completely developed since they're side characters, but...
お前早く降りろ。いい人たち。重いんやさ。失礼やな。
They have an adorable relationship. They're established as close from the get-go and are good foils for each other. Tessie is rougher on the outside and quicker to believe in supernatural phenomena, while Sayaka is more level-headed and timid. And when they poke fun at each other, it comes across as endearing.
なんかあいつ声暗かったぜ。
あんたの電話が嫌やったんやろ。
お前な。
No joke, they have better chemistry than the leads. That brings me to my biggest problem with this film. Taki and Mitsua's relationship. Allegedly, their relationship is supposed to resemble a digital one, like their friends who met online. It's not hard to see the resemblance, as the only way they communicate is by leaving each other brief messages, usually on their phones. But digital or physical, there's a critical component missing here. Development. Not once do we see these two try to get to know each other, or even have friendly conversation. The closest thing to development their relationship has is a 2-minute montage of exposition and quarreling. That's not to say you can't use a montage to show a relationship progress. It's a good technique for showing the passage of time without using up too much runtime. It's problematic in this film for 2 reasons. 1, Taki and Mitsuha had no relationship beforehand, or any indication that they were interested in being friends, let alone anything more. 2, judging by what they show in this montage, these two have so little chemistry, it's baffling that they started caring about each other at all. They're being forced into each other's bodies, so they lay down rules for the sake of keeping their own lives intact, then do nothing but drive each other up the wall. Yet, somehow, this ends up happening.
I think I'm gonna be sick.
Seriously, we're supposed to take it that these two people, who don't seem to have anything in common, or even a good reason to like each other, fell in love over supernatural texting. If they cut to the chase sooner with them realizing what was happening, they could have saved a substantial amount of runtime for building their relationship. Before we get into the plot, let's talk about the film's humor. There wasn't anything I found hilarious, but there were some decent jokes. In the beginning, when Mitsuha and Sayaka are bummed out, Tessie tries cheering them up by offering to take them to a cafe. Then there's this comment from Tsukasa after one of the body swaps.
あいつ今日は普通だな。昨日はなんか可愛かった。
While most of the jokes are alright, a few of them came off as the most predictable, low-hanging fruit you can think of. For instance, when Otakara finds her skirt ripped open, Mitsuha, while on Taki's body, does this.
スカートを脱いでください。向こう向いてますから。
Really, Mitsuha? Who takes a woman into a closed room and immediately tells them to undress? This feels like it was thrown in just so we could see Otakara in this pose. Or take this scenario. Teenage boy wakes up in teenage girl's body. Take one guess. What's the first thing he does? Nothing says anime cliche quite like boob fondling. There are 2 variations on this joke that happened later, one of which was kinda funny. Just look at his face. Sure looks like he's enjoying himself, huh? But the 3rd time is shoehorned in at an inappropriate moment. What moment is that? You'll see in a bit. Okay, plot time. The way the story is structured makes this feel less like a standalone film, and more like a full-length 12-episode anime crammed into 100 minutes. So much so that at one point, it looks like they cut to an episode-ending animation.
俺は夢の中であの女と入れ替わってる。
Tune in next time for the 2nd episode of Kimi no Na wa. Jokes aside, one of the issues that arises from this is pacing. It takes the film half an hour just to get to the point when these two realize they're switching bodies, then blows past a ton of potentially interesting material in 2 minutes through that montage. The first half of this film spends so much time showing the characters' daily lives that it turns into a run-of-the-mill slice of life. Nice to look at, cute and funny at times, but nothing to write home about. The body swapping doesn't alleviate this either, as it's a concept that's not anything new to anime, or fiction in general. That said, the film does put an interesting twist on this concept. At about the halfway mark, Taki discovers Mitsuha had died 3 years earlier when a comet struck Itomori. As Taki puts it, their timelines weren't in step. Can't say I saw that one coming. Unfortunately, this is where the narrative begins to unravel. During one of the body swaps, Taki had learned about something called musubi.
土地の氏神様をな、古い言葉で結びって呼ぶんやさ。糸をつなげることも結び、人をつなげることも結び、時間が流れることも結び。
Aside from suggesting that this is the force behind the body swapping, you might think this relates to how people connect and drift apart over time, and how our actions have a ripple effect on the lives of others. Apparently, Taki interpreted it as, if I drink that ceremonial sake that was in Mitsuha's mouth, I can go back in time and save her. I'm not kidding. He drinks this sake she made 3 years prior, which not only sends him back to the exact day the comet would come down, but also puts him back in Mitsuha's body so he can warn the town. That's incredibly convenient. How on earth did he come to that conclusion? The grandmother's monologue tells that consuming something is musubi when it joins your soul, and that the sake is left in the body of the shrine's god as an offering to connect the god and people. How does that translate to being able to time travel and switch bodies with someone? Taki also brings up how the grandmother called the point beyond the brook the underworld. That works as a foreshadow for Itomori's impending doom, but it doesn't explain Taki thinking that drinking the sake would turn back time. Also, during this time warp, Taki sees a bunch of events from Mitsuha's life, including her birth, her mother dying, and her father leaving the shrine. The thing about this sudden dump of backstory is that Taki seeing it has no impact on the story. It could have been a point of bonding between Taki and Mitsuha, as we see that Taki seems to only have a father too. But as it is, it's just here for the sake of adding melodrama. Also, when he wakes up in Mitsuha's body this time, he breaks down out of relief that she's still alive. Now, remember that third boob joke I was talking about earlier? Mitsuha's sister reacting to Taki's face would have been enough for this joke to work, but the fondling? Really? Guess he thought he would never be able to feel her up without her knowing again. Now let's talk about the film's other twist, the secret to how Taki and Mitsuha began switching bodies. Mitsuha had tried to meet Taki in person, but he didn't recognize her since she had been switching bodies with his future self. So to try and get him to remember her, she gives him the cord she used to tie up her hair.
3年前お前はあの時俺に会いに来たんだ
However, this twist doesn't work. First off, the only reason she went to see past Taki at that point in time was because she had been switching bodies with future Taki. If we go back to the point in time before the body swapping and the calamity, Taki and Mitsuha didn't know each other, so Mitsuha wouldn't have any reason to suddenly go out to Tokyo. Therefore, the two would never connect, and the body swapping never would have happened. But the way the film plays it, Mitsuha inexplicably had memories of future events because the plot wouldn't work otherwise. Second, the day the comet came down in the past was the day future Taki went on a date with Otokara. The day before that, Taki was on the mountain hike in Mitsuha's body where he learned about Musubi. But after Taki does the time warp back to C-Day, we're told that Mitsuha's trip to see past Taki had happened the day before.
昨日は急に東京に行ってまうしなんかお姉ちゃん変やよ
So you're telling me that Mitsuha's Tokyo trip and Taki's mountain hike happened on the same day? We know that the mountain hike and C-Day happened back to back because every time Taki and Mitsuha switch bodies, they switch back the next day. These aren't flaws you can hand-wave with a vague monologue about the flow of time. If you do that rather than making sure your twist makes sense, it makes the writing look cheap. Was it really that important that Mitsuha and Taki first connected due to some space-time voodoo? How about this? The film already has a dream theme going on. Like great dreams, great experiences with people may fade from your memory over time, but you still remember how they made you feel. What if Mitsuha traveled to Tokyo one day for a festival or something, met Taki, and they had a good experience that ended with her giving him the thread? It would make sense that Taki would barely remember someone he met once several years ago, they'd have a genuine connection, and it eliminates the time paradox. For that matter, the plot could be reworked to not only make the story more concise, but more effective. Rather than spending much of the first half hour beating around the bush, spend some time building up Taki and Mitsuha's relationship. Have them try to call each other by phone and find it strange that they can never seem to get a response. What if, instead of Taki discovering Itomori's destruction and miraculously figuring out time travel, Mitsuha discovered during a body swap that she was going to die in a couple days? The big reveal is still there, and it generates more suspense. Finally, let's talk a little about the soundtrack. It keeps the right tone most of the time, be it during the tranquil hike to the mountaintop, or the eerie reveal of Itomori's destruction. Then, when we get to the climax, we get a song that ruins the mood. This upbeat song plays during the entire climax. It telegraphs that our heroes will succeed, effectively killing any suspense. Can you imagine seeing Mitsuha confidently confront her father with this upbeat music playing, then finding out that the comet still killed everyone? That'd be quite silly. The music didn't have to be super dramatic to work. Music can be subtle and still create tension. I've long stood by the creed that just because something is extremely popular doesn't make it the finest artwork on Earth. Honestly, I came out of this feeling that it was the most overrated animated film in recent memory. It certainly has its good points. The settings are immaculate, the animation is well done, and it had an interesting take on an existing concept. But the lead characters are forgettable, the plot has major holes in it, some elements that should add depth to the story instead come off as inane melodrama, and above all, the relationship between the leads is both underdeveloped and ham-fisted. It's a decent film at the end of the day, but not an untouchable masterpiece like much of the hype claims. Speaking of which, the saddest part of all this concerns the film's director, Makoto Shinkai. After the film became a hit, Shinkai went on the record saying that he thought the film was unbalanced and incomplete, and he even asked people not to see it or to compare him to Miyazaki. He cited that his team wanted to keep working on the film and had plenty of ideas, but he had to put his foot down due to financial and time constraints. That's one of the cold realities and most daunting challenges of animation. You only have so much time and so many resources, and many of your ideas won't make it into the final product. If you don't find a way to deal with those limitations, you're headed for trouble. Judging by the issues with this film, it's clear that Shinkai's team was overreaching on this project. Hopefully in whatever endeavor they take on next, they learn from this one. And that concludes this episode of Animate Ball. Next time, we're in for another round of young love and a fantastical journey across steampunk Europe. Thanks for watching!